It was Christmas of 1989. I was a young teenager at the time, and Reebok had just come out with their new pump shoes. And they were the shit. I wanted them so bad. It was literally the only thing on my Christmas list. So, you know, the Christmas morning, I woke up super early like I always did. I'd been just like on pins and needles waiting for this thing all this time. And I got up that morning and I ran into the living room, and under the tree was a shoebox. A shoebox labeled Adidas. It was all I wanted, okay? Anyway, that was my worst Christmas ever. You know, for most people, Christmas is a joyous time of year, and that's great, but it can be really upsetting for some people too. You know, many people lose loved ones throughout the year, and this is their first Christmas without them. Maybe people get divorced, and this is the first Christmas without their kids. Maybe they can't afford to go see their family, and they're having to spend it alone, or maybe they want to get away from their families. Plus, it's the end of the year, and you start kind of looking back over the year that was, and let's just face it, some years are better than others. For all those reasons, levels of depression and even suicide tend to go up around the holidays. And of course, if you're feeling this way at any point, don't hesitate to call the National Helpline. But the point of this video isn't to bum you out. Actually, it's the complete opposite, by showing you that however bad your Christmas might be going, chances are there have been much worse. So here's a list of the 5 worst Christmases of all time. The first on our list comes from 1811, a tragedy that came to be known as the Richmond Theater Fire. On December 26th, the day right after Christmas, the city of Richmond, Virginia held a charity gala featuring a performance of the play Our Father or Family Feuds, which was followed by a pantomime act. Apparently this was going to take place over several days, but it kept getting canceled because of bad weather, so this turned out to be kind of a one-night event, and the place was packed. At the end of the show, as the curtain went down, the cords of the curtain accidentally got wrapped around the chandelier. Chandeliers at the time, of course, were lit by candles, so that candle caught the curtain on fire, which wound up catching the backdrop on fire that was covered with oil paint, so it went up immediately. Panic ensued as people rushed to the exits. Some people got trampled, some people jumped out the windows, but by the time the smoke cleared, literally, 72 people had died. Among the dead were Virginia's sitting governor George William Smith and a former senator named Abraham B. Venable. It was the worst urban disaster in U.S. history when it happened, although, to be fair, the U.S. was only 35 years old at the time. One man went down as a hero of the fire, a former slave named Gilbert Hunt. He actually had a blacksmith shop right across the street, and he ran over and in and out of the building several times and saved many people's lives. There's a monument there on the spot now to mark the tragedy, which I think we can safely say ruined a lot of people's Christmases that year. Just about 100 years later, history repeated itself with another theater disaster, one that killed almost the exact same number of people. This one was called the Italian Hall disaster of 1913. You know how it's illegal to yell fire in a crowded theater? This is why. It was Christmas Eve in Calumet, Michigan in 1913, and a Christmas party was being held by the Ladies Auxiliary of the Western Federation of Miners. A little background, copper mining was the main industry in the area, and the company that kind of controlled everything around there was called the Calumet and Hecla Mining Corporation, which went by the name C&H. C&H was in the middle of dealing with a strike by the Western Federation of Miners that had been going on since July, so they'd been going on for months at that point, and tensions were still pretty high. But this Christmas party was being held for the striking miners. It was on the second floor of the Italian Hall there in Calumet, and they had 400 people crammed in with only one exit. Things were going well, everybody having a jolly good time, until somebody screamed out fire, and panic ensued. People rushed to the exits, shoving people down, knocking people over, and in all the chaos, 73 people were trampled to death. And it turned out there was no fire. Somebody just yelled it out. Now, keep in mind, again, there were 400 people in this party. 73 of those 400 people were killed in this stampede. That's nearly 1 out of 5 people at this party got killed because of one jackass. Now, just really quickly, if that sounds excessive, theater fires were very much a thing back then. A lot of people died in theater fires, just like that Richmond fire that I talked about earlier. Not only do you have hundreds of people in a room with only a couple of exits, but you know, think about the theater, how many lights there are in a theater. Well, back in the day, those were done by candlelight, by lamps, open flames. It's a recipe for disaster. So yeah, dying in a theater fire was very much a thing back then, hence the panic. Now, since this incident occurred, many people have speculated that maybe this was not just some jackass that yelled out fire in the middle of this party, that maybe it was a premeditated event by the company that was retaliating against these striking miners. It was a way to kind of blow back at them. In fact, some call it the Italian Hall Massacre for that reason. Now, both of those scenarios would ruin any Christmas, but none of those scenarios sound more like a horror movie more than the Lawson family murders. The Lawson family lived on and worked a farm near Brook Cove Road near Germantown, North Carolina. They were a fairly middle-class family, but they were able to save up money by working as tobacco sharecroppers so that they could buy their own place. The parents were Charlie and Fanny Lawson, aged 43 and 37 respectively, and they had 7 children, from their oldest, Marie and Arthur, aged 17 and 16, all the way down to their 4-month baby, Mary Lou. Now, just before Christmas in 1929, Charlie took his family into town where they bought new clothes and got their photo taken. This photo would turn out to be the last time anybody saw them alive. So on Christmas Day, Charlie sent Arthur into town to run some errands, and then a couple hours later, his daughters, Carrie and Mabel, who are 12 and 7 years old, were walking to their aunt's and uncle's house down the road, and as they left the house, Charlie was waiting behind the barn with a shotgun. And as they walked past, he shot both of them dead. He then walked back to his house where Fanny had walked out onto the porch to try to investigate the noise. He shot her dead. The rest of his children ran into the house and hid from him, including Marie, his oldest daughter. Charlie Lawson then methodically worked his way through his house, killing all of his children, including the 4-month baby, who he bludgeoned to death. Several hours later, as rumors began to spread, neighbors, family, and police all gathered at the Lawson farm, where they found all the Lawson family on the ground, laid out neatly in a row in their front yard with their hands over their chests and their heads resting on rocks. As they were trying to figure out what happened, they hear a gunshot from the woods. The police ran in there to investigate, and they found Charlie Lawson dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound and a note to his parents. There were many theories as to what made Charlie snap. One of them was that he had received a head injury just a couple months before, and many people reported that his behavior had been a bit erratic since then. But another theory is that some speculate that he was in an incestuous relationship with Marie, his oldest daughter, and that she was actually pregnant at the time. Either way, the whole family met a tragic and bloody end on Christmas Day, all of them except for the 16-year-old son, Arthur. I can't imagine a much worse Christmas than that. By the way, just to add to the messed upness of all this, Charlie's brother Marion, soon after the murders, opened up the house as a tourist attraction so people could pay money to see what the house looked like where all these people were killed. So that's classy. Moving a little closer to today, in 2003, the day after Christmas, the city of Bam in Iran was struck at 2 in the morning with an earthquake that measured 6.6 on the Richter scale. Now, we've certainly heard of stronger earthquakes than that, and it only shook the city for about 8 seconds, but the result was devastating. Bam is an ancient city made mostly out of mud brick homes and buildings, and Iran gets earthquakes fairly often, so they actually have fairly stringent building standards around most of the country, but that had not really been implemented in Bam. An ancient fort called the Bam Citadel that had been standing for centuries was reduced to rubble, along with 70% of the homes and buildings in the city. 90% of the buildings in the city received some kind of substantial damage. These homes and buildings crumbled in 8 seconds at 2 in the morning. Crushing the people in their beds that are sleeping inside of them. All told, 26,271 people died in this earthquake, and another 30,000 were injured, making it the deadliest earthquake in Iranian history. But this Christmas disaster would be dwarfed only a year later by the Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004. Many of us remember the Indian Ocean tsunami. It's also sometimes called the Boxing Day tsunami because it occurred the day after Christmas. It wasn't that long ago. It was all over the news. Movies have been made about it, but the scale of this disaster, it's kind of hard to conceptualize. It started with an estimated magnitude 9.1 to 9.3 earthquake on the fault line between the Burma Plate and the Indian Plate in the ocean off the coast of Sumatra. Some crazy facts about this earthquake: it's the 3rd strongest earthquake ever recorded, and it rang the earth like a bell, actually remotely setting off earthquakes as far away as Alaska. Now that's insanely strong, but it also happened to be a type of earthquake called a underwater megathrust earthquake, where one plate actually goes underneath another, which has the capacity for pushing vast amounts of water, which created 30-meter high waves that swept over the land. These waves hit some heavily populated areas, including some popular tourist areas, killing 227,898 people in 14 countries, many of whom were tourists who were on holiday vacation. Indonesia was the hardest hit, especially the city of Banda Aceh, which received the highest number of deaths. I don't know if I said that name right. Apologies if I didn't. The Indian Ocean tsunami has gone down as one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history. Definitely the most deadly natural disaster in the 21st century, making it the worst Christmas of all time. You know what, let's leave this on a lighter note, shall we? One last story. In December of 1950, right at the beginning of the Korean War, thousands of North Korean refugees were fleeing the country to escape persecution. This doesn't sound like a happier note, just wait. One of the places where they went to escape the country was the Hungnam docks, where Allied ships were ferrying people away, but all the passenger ships had already left by December 21st, leaving only a few small cargo and supply ships. Countless thousands of Korean refugees packed the area trying to flee the communist forces that were descending on the harbor. And it was then that the captain of a small supply ship called the SS Meredith Victory, Captain Leonard LaRue, made a fateful decision. He ordered his ship emptied of all supplies and weapons and filled the cargo holds in the deck with as many people as he could possibly fit. They got 14,000 people on there before they left the harbor, which was then destroyed to keep the communist forces from being able to use it. People were crammed into this ship like sardines, literally unable to move, just butt to crotch for 4 days while they sailed to Goje Island. Just to put things in stark relief, the Meredith Victory was made to only have a crew of 35. It now had 14,000 people on it. They had no food, no water, and no way to defend themselves. Literally, the only weapon on board was the captain's service revolver. And to make matters even worse, they were sailing through mine-infested waters. Somehow, against all odds, they made it through without a single loss of life. In fact, they arrived at the port with more people than they left with, because 5 women gave birth on the way. On Christmas Day in 1950, the Meredith Victory pulled up into the port of Goje, and 14,000 people started a new life with freedom. 2 of which went on to have a son who became Moon Jae-in, the current president of South Korea, who's done a lot of work to ease the tensions between the 2 countries. It would become known as the Ship of Miracles. In fact, there's a documentary out there about it with that very same name, and it went down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest evacuation from land from a single ship. There, see? It's not all bad. So next week, if you're dealing with family or you didn't get the present that you want, just remember, it can always be worse. I am curious what kind of responses I'm going to get from this. Tell me in the comments what your worst Christmas ever might have been. I hope it's not as bad as some of these, but we probably have some interesting stories to tell. I'll be back on Monday with a very non-Christmas related video, so until next time, I hope you guys have a happy Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating. If you celebrate Festivus, I hope your errands of grievances is very short. All right, if this is your first time here, thanks for watching. You can check out this video right here because Google thinks you might like it, and if you do, maybe check out some other videos and maybe subscribe because I come back with videos like this every Thursday and every Monday. All right, thanks again for watching. Happy holidays, everybody. Now go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week, and I'll see you on Monday. Love you guys. Take care.